I was rinsing a coffee mug in my kitchen sink when someone knocked like they already knew I was home. Not a polite tap, not a neighbor, just a steady, confident knock that didn't match the quiet of the street. When I opened the door, my mother was standing there under a wet umbrella, holding a folded newspaper against her chest like it was a medical chart. Her hair looked thinner than I remembered. Her hands shook a little, but her posture was still the same. Straight spine, shoulders set, the kind of stance you learn when people always move out of your way. She didn't say hello. She said, "We need to talk about your daughter." I didn't step aside. I didn't invite her in. I just held the door where it was and felt my stomach go still, like my body had decided to stop making extra noise. Because the last thing my mother ever said to me, 19 years earlier, was, "You're not our daughter anymore." And she meant it. Behind her, rain slid off the porch roof in thin sheets. The street smelled like wet cedar and cold pavement. Somewhere down the block, a car door shut and a dog barked once, then stopped. My mother's eyes kept flicking past me, like she expected to see my daughter in the hallway. I said quietly, "You don't get to use that word." Her mouth tightened. She looked down at the newspaper again, as if it might tell her what to say next. I didn't take it from her. I didn't ask what it said. But I noticed the headline anyway, because the ink was bold and the photo was large, and my mother had folded the paper in a way that made sure I couldn't miss it. And I noticed something else too, something that hadn't happened yet, but would soon enough. A week later, a courier would leave a thick international envelope on our doorstep, with a return address from a law firm in another country. That envelope would change the shape of our lives in a way my parents never saw coming. But standing there in my doorway, with my mother in the rain, and that newspaper pressed to her chest, I didn't know any of that yet. I only knew one thing. Whatever she'd come for, it wasn't peace, and it wasn't love. 19 years earlier, I was 19 and pregnant, and my parents were hosting Thanksgiving dinner in their house on the hill. One of those neighborhoods where the lawns are clipped short and the front windows are tall, like the people inside have nothing to hide. The dining room smelled like rosemary and butter. The table was set with heavy plates and real linen napkins that scratched a little when you unfolded them. Someone had lit candles, and the wax scent mixed with the turkey like it belonged there. There were 12 relatives around that table. Every one of them had a title: doctor, attorney, professor, everyone except Eli. Eli wasn't even supposed to be there. I'd told my parents we were seeing each other, like it was temporary, like it was casual, but by late October, hiding an 8-month pregnancy under oversized sweaters wasn't working anymore, and I'd run out of ways to pretend. Eli sat at the far end of the table, shoulders slightly hunched, hands folded in his lap when he wasn't eating. He'd worn the only suit he owned, and it didn't quite fit right in the shoulders. He kept smoothing the fabric at his knee like he could flatten his nerves into it. My mother noticed first. She always noticed first. "Mara," she said, in that calm voice she used at the hospital when she needed a room to listen. The dessert conversation stopped mid-sentence. "Stand up." So I did. 12 pairs of eyes went to my stomach. The candlelight wavered. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer beeped and kept beeping until someone finally turned it off. My father set his fork down carefully, like this was going to be a formal discussion. On the wall behind him was a framed crest that had been in our family for as long as I could remember, the kind of thing you don't hang unless you want people to ask about it. My grandmother had opened one of the first women-run clinics in the state back in the 1950s. My parents treated that legacy like a rule you weren't allowed to break. My father looked at me and said, "How far along?" 8 months. He didn't blink. "And the father?" I swallowed once. Eli Mercer. He's an electrician." The word electrician landed on that table like a dropped glass. One of my uncles actually let out a short laugh, more disbelief than humor, then covered it with a cough. My mother didn't laugh at all. She reached toward the sideboard, opened a drawer, and pulled out a manila folder like she'd been waiting for her cue. She slid it across the table toward me. "I had a background check run," she said. 3 weeks ago, the room went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. I opened the folder with slow fingers. Paperwork, a printed profile, a line about Eli's trade certificate, a section about his father, a note about an old medical license revoked decades earlier. My mother watched my face like she was monitoring a patient's vitals. "You want to tie our name to this?" she said. Not a question, a verdict. I should have stood up right then. I should have put the folder back on the table and walked out with Eli without saying another word. Instead, I tried to explain. I told them Eli had started working as a teenager to help his mom pay rent. I told them he was steady, kind, the sort of person who fixed things without being asked. My father stood up, tall, quiet, the kind of authority that made hospital boardrooms fall silent. He said, "You're going to end the pregnancy." The candle flames trembled in the draft from someone shifting in their chair. "I'll handle it," he added, like he was offering me a favor. "Privately. Then you'll take a year and you'll start school like we planned." My hands were shaking, but my voice came out even. "I'm keeping the baby." Silence. My mother's jaw tightened. My father's face didn't change at all. Then my mother said, "Pack your things." And my father said, "If you walk out of this house, you're not coming back." An hour later, I was upstairs in my childhood bedroom stuffing my life into 2 trash bags because that's what my mother handed me. Black plastic, like I was clearing out garbage instead of leaving home. Downstairs, I could hear forks clinking again. Someone laughed too loudly, like they were trying to seal the moment shut. When I came down the stairs, my mother was already taking my photo out of the hallway frame. Not the family photos, not the group shots. Only mine. I stopped on the last step and said, "Mom." She didn't look up. I said, "I'm still your daughter." She slid the photo out, set it face down on the console table, and said, "Not anymore." I walked to the front door. It was heavy wood with a polished brass handle, the kind of door that always closes solidly behind you, no matter how gently you pull it. When I opened it, rain hit my face immediately, cold and sharp. And there, at the curb, was Eli's old pickup idling, wipers dragging back and forth across the windshield. He was standing beside it in the rain, holding a small box in one hand. He didn't wave. He didn't rush me. He just looked at me like I was something worth waiting for. I stepped onto the porch, and then I paused, with the door still open behind me, hearing the warmth of that house in one direction and the rain in the other, knowing I was about to choose one, and that the choice would be permanent. I closed the door behind me without slamming it. The latch caught. The sound was simple, final, and quieter than I expected. For a second, I just stood on the porch, rain hitting my hair, my sleeves, the trash bags at my feet. Eli didn't ask what happened inside. He didn't look past me toward the house. He just lifted the bags into the truck bed like it was the most normal thing in the world, pulled a tarp over them so they wouldn't soak through, and tied it down with a piece of cord he already had in his pocket. Then he opened the passenger door. The interior light didn't work, so the cab was mostly shadow, but I could see his face in the gray light from the street. Wet hair stuck to his forehead. His suit jacket looked darker at the shoulders from the rain. He held that ring box out, not like a performance, just a steady offer. "I called the courthouse," he said. His voice was low, controlled, careful with me. "We can do it Friday." That's when I cried. Not at the table, not when my mother said what she said, not when I stuffed my life into trash bags. I cried when he opened a door and made room for me. I climbed into the truck. The seat fabric was rough and smelled faintly like oil and laundry detergent. Eli shut the door, circled around, got in, and put the ring box in the cup holder like it was something we'd deal with later. We didn't talk much on the drive. The heater blew lukewarm air. The wipers kept time. My phone buzzed once, then again, then went quiet. I looked down and saw that my service had dropped. My family plan, Gone. Eli noticed without me saying anything. He reached into the center console and handed me his phone. "Use mine," he said. I didn't. I put it back. Then I stared out at wet streetlights and tried to keep my breathing even. We got married that Friday in a courthouse room that smelled like old carpet and disinfectant. No flowers, no guests. We needed 2 witnesses, and we didn't have 2 people we could call. An older woman was sitting on a bench in the hallway waiting for a hearing. She had a tote bag on her lap and a paperback in her hands. When Eli asked if she would sign, she looked at us for a long moment, then nodded like she'd already decided. "I'm June," she said. "I'll be your witness." The second witness was a man in a suit who said he had a break between clients. He signed quickly, then smiled at us in a way that felt strangely gentle. "You two look young," he said. Eli answered calmly. "We're old enough to know." The clerk pushed papers toward us. I signed my name with a hand that still shook a little. I wrote, Mara Alden Hart. I kept my maiden name as my middle name. Eli noticed. He didn't comment. He just slid his hand across the table and touched my fingertips once, like a small anchor. It cost $60. We walked out married into a thin winter sun that didn't warm anything. June insisted on taking a photo with her little camera, an actual camera, not a phone, and she promised she'd mail it to us. "You'll want it someday," she said. 3 days later, it arrived with a short note and the photo tucked inside. It's still in a frame in our kitchen. Our daughter, Lila, was born in early spring, 7 pounds and change. I remember because my parents would have asked if they'd been the kind of grandparents who asked. In the hospital room, the fluorescent light buzzed softly. The air smelled like sanitizer and warmed blankets. Eli sat in the chair by the bed with Lila against his chest, holding her like he'd been practicing his whole life. I stared at my phone twice that day. My mother's contact was still there. Her name, her title, the hospital extension I'd memorized as a kid. My thumb hovered. Eli didn't tell me what to do. He didn't lecture me. He just looked up from our newborn daughter and said gently, "Don't." Not angry, not bitter, just certain. "She didn't earn this," he added. So I put my phone face down on the blanket and turned back toward the baby. I did try once, later. Just once. Lila was a month from being born when I sent an email to the address my parents still used for family messages. I kept it short, calm, almost formal. I told them my due date. I told them the baby looked healthy on ultrasound. I told them Eli had gotten his next certification and more stable hours. I wrote one line that mattered. "Please, just meet your granddaughter once." I sent it late at night and stared at the timestamp like it could make them respond. The reply came the next morning, not from either of them, but from an assistant. The wording was clipped, professional, like I was a stranger asking for a referral. It said they had no granddaughter, and it asked me not to contact them again. I printed that email and my original one. I put them in a folder and labeled it something neutral, like it was a document for the future and not a wound. When Lila was older and asked why she didn't have grandparents, I told her, "Some families are smaller than others. Ours has what it needs." She accepted it. Kids can accept a lot when the house is steady. We rented a 1-bedroom apartment over a small nail salon. The stairwell always smelled like acetone and lemon cleaner. At night, we could hear the dryer tumbling through the wall and someone's music muffled below us. We gave the bedroom to Lila. Eli and I slept on a futon in the living room for almost 2 years. We learned how to move quietly around each other, how to fold blankets fast, how to keep the sink empty because clutter felt like panic when money was tight. Most of Lila's things were secondhand. A crib someone posted online, a stroller with one squeaky wheel, bags of baby clothes from a neighbor with twins who looked at me once and said, "You'll return the favor someday." Eli worked days wiring new builds, then took evening side jobs, ceiling fans, outlets, old houses where the electrical work had been done wrong and everyone knew it. I took online classes at night while Lila slept. Not medical school. That door was closed, at least for then. I learned billing and coding, the language of hospitals that runs quietly beneath everything else. I became the person who could read a chart and translate it into the numbers that kept a family from drowning. My first job was at a hospital system across town. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sat under fluorescent lights in a cubicle with a headset and a dual monitor, coding surgeries, ER visits, pediatric consults. Sometimes my mother's name showed up on paperwork. I never saw her in person at first. Just her signature in a chart note, scanned in black ink. I would stare at it for a second, then keep working. Because the claim still had to go through. The family still needed coverage. The system still needed accuracy. That was what my life became. Showing up, doing the work, not asking anyone's permission. One night when Lila was still a toddler, she spiked a fever that made my hands go cold. Eli was in the kitchen mixing a little electrolyte drink the way the nurse line told us to. Lila lay against my shoulder, burning hot, her breath shallow and fast. I grabbed my phone. My mother's number was still saved. My thumb hovered again. Eli didn't stop me with words. He just reached out, gently took the phone from my hand, and put it on the counter like he was setting down a tool that didn't belong in this job. "We'll take her in," he said. "We'll figure it out." We did. The ER bill was more than we could pay at once. We set up a payment plan and chipped away at it for 2 years. Every month we sent what we could, and every month I felt the strange relief of responsibility, like at least this part was honest. 2 years later, the housing market dipped and people started talking about foreclosures like they were weather. We found a small house on the east side, not far from a bus line and a park with an old swing set. It was built in the 1950s. The floors creaked. The kitchen had cabinets that didn't close all the way. The wiring was a mess. Most buyers walked through and got scared. Eli walked through with a flashlight and a tester, opening outlets, checking panels, tracing what he could with patient hands. In the kitchen, he stood still for a minute, then looked at me. "It's bad," he said, "but it's fixable." "How long?" I asked. "Couple months, nights and weekends." "And money?" He pulled out a folder the inspector had given us, highlighted sections like he'd already been doing math in his head. "The price is low because of the work," he said. "If I do it myself and we get it reappraised, it'll make sense. It'll be tight at first, but it'll be ours." I remember the way he said ours, not like ownership, like shelter. So we bought it. And for the next several weeks, Eli rewired the entire house after work, pulling cable through walls while our daughter sat in a playpen in the living room, watching him the way kids watch magic tricks. Her first full sentence wasn't "I love you," it was "Daddy fix light," and that was close enough. The day we moved in, Eli pulled an old outlet cover off in the kitchen, and something fell out of the wall. A piece of newspaper, folded and yellowed, stuffed in like insulation. He unfolded it. His eyes went still for a second. Then he stepped outside without saying anything. A minute later, I smelled smoke. When I went to the back, he was standing by the metal barrel we'd been using for debris, holding the newspaper while it burned down into ash. "Just old trash in the walls," he said. He didn't look at me when he said it. I didn't push, but I noticed his hands were shaking a little, and I noticed the date printed at the top before it disappeared into flame. And I filed that away, because by then, I'd learned something important. Some things aren't meant to be carried around in the open. Some things get handled quietly. Then you move on. Years passed like that. Work, school, projects, bills, small celebrations, quiet routines, and our house filled up with evidence of stability, framed school certificates, a repaired porch step, a kitchen light that never flickered, because Eli did things correctly the first time. By the time Lila was in high school, we weren't just surviving anymore. We were steady. And I thought for a long time, that steady meant safe. Then, one morning in early fall, a courier left a thick international envelope at our front door, It had a return address from a law firm overseas. Eli called me from the kitchen, and his voice didn't sound like his own. "May," he said, "we got something." I drove home without thinking. When I walked in, he was sitting at the table with the envelope already open, papers spread out like a puzzle he didn't want to solve alone. He looked up at me and said very quietly, "It's from my father." And then he slid the first page across the table. I sat down and I started to read. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Thick stock, formal letterhead, an international law firm I'd never heard of, with offices listed in 3 cities I couldn't pronounce correctly on the first try. Eli sat across from me at the kitchen table. The afternoon light came in through the blinds in narrow lines, cutting across the paperwork. "I read it twice," he said. "It doesn't change." I nodded once and kept reading. His father was alive. Not just alive, wealthy, very wealthy. The letter explained that after losing his medical license decades earlier, he had moved overseas and built a pharmaceutical consulting business. There were numbers listed in clean columns, asset valuations, holdings, estimated net worth. And then there was the line that made everything else feel secondary. End-stage renal disease. He was on dialysis 3 times a week, prognosis limited, transplant recommended, time sensitive. I've worked in hospital administration for years. I know how to read medical language without getting lost in it. Glomerular filtration rate, 9. Dialysis dependent, living donor search initiated. I turned the page. There was a paragraph about Eli being named sole beneficiary of the estate. 10-point-something million US dollars, converted from another currency. Irrevocable trust, unconditional, and then, carefully worded, almost polite. He would like the opportunity to meet his son, and potentially discuss a medical matter involving a compatible family donor. I looked up at Eli. "He needs a kidney," I said. Eli didn't answer right away. He was staring at the far wall, but I could tell he wasn't seeing it. "He left when I was 10, he said finally. "No calls, no birthdays, nothing." His voice wasn't angry, just factual. "And now he wants to talk." I turned the page again. There was an attachment, a private investigator's summary. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. They had listed our address, our mortgage balance, estimated household income, Eli's contractor license number, my position at the hospital, and then Lila, her age, her university, her blood type. O positive. I felt something inside me go very still. "He had someone follow us," I said. Eli leaned forward and took the pages from me, scanning them faster now. There were dates, photos referenced. Subject observed entering campus science building. Subject observed leaving residence. Strong family bonds noted. I placed my hand flat on the table. I didn't raise my voice, but something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about an apology. This wasn't just about money. This was a process. And processes can be handled. The next step wasn't emotional. It was procedural. Step 1. Confirm authenticity. I called the law firm listed on the letterhead. I asked for the partner named in the signature. I requested written confirmation through secure channels. Step 2. Verify the trust documents. I forwarded copies to a local estate attorney I trusted through work connections. Quiet, discreet. Step 3. Gather medical clarity. I requested additional documentation through the firm. HLA typing results, transplant center correspondence, official diagnosis notes. No opinions, just records. I didn't ask Eli what he wanted yet. I didn't ask Lila anything. I gathered facts. That's what I do when something feels unstable. I build a file. 3 days later, we had confirmation. The trust was real, unconditional. If Eli's father passed away, the assets transferred regardless of any medical decision. There was no legal mechanism tying the inheritance to organ donation. That mattered. The transplant records were real too. Dialysis started in early summer. Living donor search ongoing. Family compatibility preferred. I read the transplant coordinator's note twice. Primary biological son located. Adult granddaughter potential candidate. Recommend HLA typing. I closed the folder slowly. Then I looked at Eli. We have to tell her, I said. He nodded. She decides, he said. Yes. And we both knew what that meant. We drove to Lila's campus that weekend. It was a mild afternoon. Students moved between buildings with backpacks and coffee cups, the air smelling faintly of wet grass and food trucks. Lila met us outside her dorm. She smiled when she saw us, then paused when she noticed we weren't smiling back. What's wrong? She asked. We didn't answer in the parking lot. We waited until we were inside her small dorm room, twin bed, desk covered in biology notes, a whiteboard with exam dates written in blue marker. Eli laid the folder on the desk. Sit, he said gently. Lila sat. I watched her face as she read. No panic, no dramatics, just quiet focus. She flipped pages slowly. When she reached the medical section, her eyes sharpened, pre-med brain engaging. He's O positive, she said. So am I. She looked up. He needs a transplant. Yes, Eli said. And he's your dad. Yes. She went back to the page about the private investigator. Her jaw tightened slightly when she saw the surveillance notes. He's been watching us. I didn't defend him. I didn't excuse it. I just said, yes. There was a long pause. Then Lila asked the question I expected. Is the money conditional? No, I answered immediately. Legally documented. You can say no and nothing changes. She nodded slowly. And you want me to… Eli shook his head before she finished. I don't want you to do anything, he said. I want you to understand your options. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Okay, she said. Then I want to get tested. Eli blinked once. Not because I'm agreeing, she added calmly. Because I want information. I don't make decisions without data. I felt a strange mix of fear and pride. That's reasonable, I said. She nodded again, already moving into analysis mode. If I'm not a match, the conversation ends, she said. If I am, then we talk about it. Eli's hands were clasped together in front of him, knuckles white but steady. That's your choice, he said. Yes, she replied. It is. The transplant evaluation appointment happened 2 weeks later. Lila insisted on going through the first round alone. I'm an adult, she said simply. Eli and I sat in the waiting area anyway. Hospitals all smell the same: sanitizer, coffee from a nearby kiosk, recycled air. I watched the clock above the registration desk tick forward. When Lila came back out, she had a bandage on her arm and a small stack of pamphlets. Phase 1 done, she said, like she'd completed a lab assignment. Blood typing reconfirmed. Basic metabolic panel. Initial compatibility screening. We waited for results. Those days were quiet. No media yet. No grandparents knocking on doors. Just our family sitting in a house Eli had wired himself, eating dinner at the same table where we'd read that first letter. When the call came, it was mid-afternoon. Lila stepped into the kitchen and put the phone on speaker. 5 out of 6 antigen match, the coordinator said. Excellent compatibility. I watched Eli's shoulders rise and fall once. Lila didn't cry. She didn't smile. She said, "Thank you," and hung up. Then she turned to us. "Okay," she said calmly. "Now we actually have a decision." And in that moment, I understood something clearly. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything to my parents. It wasn't even about money. It was about autonomy. And I knew from experience that autonomy isn't loud. It's quiet. It's structured. And it requires boundaries. That's when the situation moved from unexpected to deliberate. Because once compatibility was confirmed, the next step wasn't emotional. It was ethical. And ethics comes with committees. The email from the transplant center arrived on a Tuesday morning. Subject line: Ethics review required. I read it once at my desk, then again, slower. Due to the complexity of the case, Lila's evaluation would go before the hospital ethics committee. Concerns listed in bullet points. No prior relationship with recipient, significant financial inheritance involved. Age, 19. Public exposure risk, potential coercion, direct or indirect. I forwarded it to our family group chat. Lila responded first. So apparently my kidney is now a committee topic. Eli replied, "Want us there?" She wrote back, "Yes, not to talk, just to sit." I put my phone face down. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it Documentation. This is where things shifted for me. Not emotionally, structurally. When something becomes public, you don't react. You organize. Step 1. Secure legal clarity. I asked our estate attorney for written confirmation that the inheritance was not conditional in any way. I requested it in plain language. Step 2. Document autonomy. I wrote a dated statement confirming that neither Eli nor I had encouraged donation. I asked Lila to write one too, in her own words. Step 3. Archive history. I printed the email from 19 years ago, the one where my parents said they had no granddaughter. I wasn't planning to use it. I just wanted it accessible, not as a weapon, as context. Because I've worked in systems long enough to understand something important. When rooms get formal, paperwork matters more than emotion. The media found us before the ethics committee date. It started with a voicemail from a reporter asking for clarification regarding a family medical decision involving international assets. Then a local article appeared online. The headline used words like fortune and life-saving and granddaughter. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Someone inside an insurance processing department had connected dots. Kidney failure, wealthy former physician overseas, local family, pre-med student. The details weren't entirely wrong. They were just incomplete. My phone buzzed for hours. Texts from coworkers. A message from Lila's academic advisor asking if she needed space. Strangers online arguing about morality under her photo. I watched it unfold like weather. Lila came home that weekend. She walked in with her backpack slung over one shoulder, set it down quietly, and said, "I turned off my notifications." Eli hugged her once, tight but brief. We sat at the kitchen table again. Same table, same light through the blinds, different pressure. "Here's the reality," Lila said calmly. "Medically, I can do it. The risk is small, but not zero." She'd printed journal articles, highlighted sections, written notes in the margins. "Mortality risk, roughly 1 in 3,000, she said. Eli inhaled slowly, but didn't interrupt. "Long-term risk, slightly higher chance of kidney disease later in life. Pregnancy risks increase slightly." She looked at me. "I want kids someday," she said. Not dramatic, just factual. I nodded. "And if I ever need a transplant myself," she continued, "having only one kidney changes my priority status." She closed the folder. "The money doesn't matter. It's not conditional." "No," I said. "It's not." "So this isn't about leverage," she said. "It's about choice." "Yes." She leaned back in her chair. "I don't feel pressured by you," she said, looking at both of us. "I feel observed by the world." That was accurate. 3 days before the ethics hearing, my mother knocked on our door, the same door she'd told me I couldn't walk back through 19 years earlier. It was evening. The porch light had just turned on automatically. The air smelled like damp leaves. She was holding a newspaper again. I opened the door but didn't step aside. She looked thinner, older, controlled, but frayed at the edges. "I saw the article," she said. I waited. "I'm concerned about Lila." "You don't have a granddaughter," I said evenly. Her mouth tightened. "I was wrong," she said quickly. "We were wrong." Eli stepped into view behind me but didn't speak. My mother continued, "There's a significant inheritance involved. A financial incentive of that size creates ethical pressure." I watched her carefully. "This isn't about ethics," I said. "It's about reputation." She stiffened. "Your father's health is declining," she added. "Parkinson's, early stages, treatment is expensive." I didn't move. "I'm not discussing money with you," I said calmly. She took a small step forward, lowering her voice. "If she donates, this will follow her forever. People will assume she did it for the money." I met her eyes. "If she declines, people will assume she's selfish," I replied. Silence. Eli spoke then, quiet and steady. "You told Mara she was throwing away 4 generations of healers for me." My mother didn't look at him. "You don't get to decide what healing looks like anymore," he said. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I kept my voice even. "You're not here to protect her. You're here to manage a narrative." Her shoulders dropped slightly. "I want to make amends," she said. "Amends require accountability," I replied. "Not timing." She stood there for another moment. Then she turned and walked back down the steps. The porch light flicked off automatically behind her. I closed the door without force. And that was that. The ethics committee hearing was held in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. 7 members seated at a long table: medical director, transplant surgeon, social worker, legal counsel, psychiatrist, community ethicist, patient advocate, 2 observers. Lila sat between Eli and me. On a large screen at the front of the room, Eli's father appeared from a hospital bed overseas. He looked smaller than I expected, thinner, oxygen tubing under his nose. He spoke clearly. "I do not expect her to donate," he said. The room stayed quiet. "I forfeited that expectation decades ago," he added. He apologized to Eli directly. No excuses, no dramatics, just acknowledgement. Eli didn't speak. He just listened. Then the committee turned to Lila. Dr. Morrison, the ethics chair, asked the key question, "Do you feel free to decide?" Lila answered without hesitation, "Yes." The psychiatrist summarized her evaluation: full cognitive capacity, clear understanding of risks, no evidence of coercion from immediate family, financial awareness acknowledged but not determinative. Then my mother entered the room. Uninvited. She identified herself with her professional title, raised concerns about coercion, referenced neurological development of young adults, cited academic literature. I didn't interrupt. The committee chair eventually asked her to sit. Lila turned in her chair and looked at her directly. "You don't get to advocate for me now," she said calmly. There was no anger in her voice, just boundary. The room went still. And in that moment, I realized something important. Silence is not weakness. It's control. Because when you let someone speak long enough, they reveal exactly why they're there. The committee returned focus to Lila. Dr. Morrison asked the final question. "Do you consent to proceed with donation?" Lila stood. She took a breath, and she said, "No." Not defensive, not loud, just clear. "I want to finish medical school. I want children someday. I don't believe I should alter my body permanently to prove compassion." She looked at the screen. "I hope you find another donor, but it won't be me." Eli exhaled slowly. I reached for her hand. The committee chair nodded. "Autonomy affirmed," she said. Hearing concluded. The room emptied gradually. Reporters waited outside. Lila paused before stepping into the hallway. She turned to one of them and said only one sentence. "My body, my choice, that's it." Then she walked past them, and for the first time since that envelope arrived, I felt the situation settle. Not because it was over, but because it was decided. And decisions, once made clearly, don't require defense. They require steadiness. And we were steady. The drive home from the ethics hearing was quiet. Rain tapped lightly against the windshield. Traffic moved steadily. No one rushed. Lila sat in the back seat with her headphones in, looking out the window. Eli kept both hands on the steering wheel, posture straight, jaw relaxed. I watched the road and let the silence do its work. About 20 minutes into the drive, Eli glanced in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" he asked. Lila slid one earbud out. "I feel steady," she said. "Tired, but steady." "That's good," I replied. It was. Guilt wasn't present. Anger wasn't present. Just clarity. And clarity is sustainable. 2 days later, another article was published. The tone had shifted. Less spectacle. More discussion of autonomy, consent, medical ethics. The headline quoted Lila directly. She said no. The comment sections were still loud, but something had changed. The story wasn't about money anymore. It was about boundaries. I didn't engage with any of it. Instead, I reviewed the trust paperwork one more time. Asset transfer timeline, tax structure, distribution schedule. The estate attorney confirmed everything again in writing. No clauses, no contingencies, no medical linkage. I printed the confirmation and placed it in the documentation folder. Then I waited. My mother texted me that evening. "Can we talk?" I read it once. I didn't respond. She called. I let it ring. Silence, when chosen, is a statement. The next afternoon, she showed up at the hospital where I worked. Not in the lobby. In my office. She must have asked reception for directions. When she stepped into the doorway, I was reviewing quarterly revenue reports. I looked up calmly. "This is not appropriate," I said. She closed the door behind her. "I'm not here about the money," she said. "Then why are you here?" I asked. She sat down without being invited. "I'm worried about how this makes our family look." There it was. I folded my hands on the desk. "Our family?" I repeated. She inhaled sharply. "You know what I mean." "No," I said evenly. "I don't." She shifted in the chair. "You chose them," she said quietly. "Yes," I answered. "I did. And now the entire state knows." "Yes." Her composure slipped slightly. "Do you understand what this does to a professional reputation?" I looked at the framed certifications on my wall, then back at her. "I do," I said. "That's why I've built mine carefully." She stared at me, trying to find an opening. "You're letting her close a door that can't be reopened," she said. "That's what autonomy is," I replied. She exhaled, long and frustrated. "You're punishing us." "No," I said calmly. "You made your decision 19 years ago. This is simply the long-term outcome." Her eyes filled, but she held herself upright. "Your father is ill," she said. "He doesn't have time." I nodded once. "I'm aware." "And you feel nothing?" "I feel a lot," I said. "But I don't confuse feeling with obligation." She didn't have an answer for that. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air vent. After a moment, she stood. "If she donates, this all resolves differently," she said softly. "She didn't," I replied. Another pause. Then she left. No raised voices, no theatrics, just two people acknowledging that their definitions of family had diverged permanently. That evening, Eli received an email from his father's attorney. Brief, professional. "Mr. Mercer understands and respects Lila's decision. The inheritance remains unchanged. He wishes the family well." Eli read it twice, then handed the phone to me. "He's not fighting," Eli said. "No," I replied. "He isn't." That mattered. Not for money. For posture. His father wasn't attempting manipulation. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't reframing the narrative. He was accepting the outcome. That's the difference between pressure and regret. A week later, Eli received a direct message from his father through the attorney. A short written note dictated from the hospital. It read, "I'm relieved she chose herself. That's something I didn't teach you well enough." Eli sat in the garage workshop when he read it. I found him there an hour later, tools laid out on the bench, unused. He wasn't crying loudly. He was just sitting still. "He's right," Eli said quietly. "She made the right call." I sat beside him on the old wooden stool. "I know," I said. He nodded once. "I don't forgive him," he added. "I know," I said again. Forgiveness and acknowledgement are not the same thing. He folded the note once and put it in a drawer. Not displayed, not destroyed, just stored. Then something else happened, something predictable. My father requested a meeting, not through my mother, directly. He asked to meet at a neutral location, a medical office conference room downtown, public enough to prevent dramatics, private enough to speak. I agreed, not for reconciliation, for clarity. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. I arrived 5 minutes early. I brought one folder, the documentation folder, emails, dates, statements, not to argue, to anchor. When he walked in, he looked smaller than I remembered, Parkinson's tremor visible in one hand, posture still formal. He sat across from me at a small rectangular table. No embrace, no pleasantries. "I won't take much of your time," he said. "I don't have much to give," I replied calmly. He nodded. "I read the coverage," he said. "I'm sure you did." He clasped his hands together to steady them. "I don't agree with her decision," he said. "That's not required," I answered. He looked at me carefully. "You raised her to think this way." "Yes." "And you see that as success." "Yes." He leaned back slightly. "For what it's worth," he said, "your presentation to the ethics board was structured." I almost smiled. "That's how systems work," I replied. He glanced at the folder in front of me. "You brought documentation." "I did." He hesitated. "Are we beyond repair?" I considered the question fully before answering. "We are beyond the version of repair that pretends nothing happened." He didn't respond immediately. Then he nodded slowly. "That's fair," he said. No apology, but no denial either. The meeting ended in less than 30 minutes. We shook hands, formal, controlled. I left without looking back. When I got home that evening, Lila was at the kitchen counter studying. Eli was chopping vegetables. The house smelled like garlic and basil. Normal, steady. "How did it go?" Eli asked. "It was orderly," I said. Lila looked up. "Did he apologize?" she asked. "No," I replied. "He acknowledged structure." She smiled faintly. "That sounds like him." "Yes," I said. We ate dinner. No speeches, no analysis, just plates, forks, conversation about classes and upcoming exams. The world outside was still discussing our family online, but inside our house the air felt level, and I understood something clearly that night. Closure doesn't always arrive as reconciliation. Sometimes it arrives as confirmation. Confirmation that you built something durable. And that durability doesn't depend on approval, it depends on choice. And we had chosen. Walter passed away in mid-January. The email came at 6:12 a.m. Subject line: Notification of death, estate processing. I was already awake. I've never slept well during transitional periods. I read the message once, then again, more slowly. Cause of death: complications related to end-stage renal disease. Time of passing: 3:48 p.m., local time overseas. The attorney's note was brief, professional, respectful. The trust would be executed within 5 business days. I closed the email and sat still for a moment. Then I walked into the kitchen. Eli was making coffee. The grinder hummed. The smell filled the room. "He's gone," I said. Eli nodded once, no visible shock, just a long exhale. "Okay," he replied. We stood there quietly while the coffee brewed. No dramatic reaction, just acknowledgement. The transfer happened exactly as documented. 5 business days later, the funds appeared in the designated account. $10.2 million. Clean transfer. No holds. No complications. I logged into the banking portal myself. I verified routing numbers. I printed confirmation statements. I cross-checked them with the estate attorney's documentation. Then I created a new folder, post-transfer plan, because money without structure becomes noise, and I don't like noise. That evening, the three of us sat at the kitchen table again. Same table, different scale. Eli placed a yellow legal pad in front of him. "I've been thinking," he said. "I know," I replied. He gave me a small look. He always thinks in advance, always runs scenarios. Lila folded her hands and listened. "We don't need to change how we live," Eli said first. "That's important." I nodded. "We expand carefully," he continued. "No lifestyle inflation, no announcements." Lila smiled faintly. "Agreed," she said. We approached it like a project. Step 1, security. We allocated a significant portion into diversified investments and long-term accounts. Quiet, managed, boring on purpose. Step 2, education. We created a dedicated fund covering the full projected cost of Lila's undergraduate completion, medical school tuition, living expenses, board exams, no loans, no pressure to specialize based on salary, just freedom. Step 3, business expansion. Eli had been turning away work for years, especially from low-income homeowners who needed rewiring but couldn't afford standard rates. We established capital for equipment, additional licensed electricians, and a sliding scale program, safe wiring, fair pricing, no publicity. Step 4, community grant. This was Eli's idea, a small foundation, privately structured, offering housing and emergency grants to young parents who had been cut off by their families, security deposits, utility catch-up payments, short-term childcare support, no publicity, no press releases, just application, review, disbursement. We wrote eligibility criteria carefully, no moral evaluation, no religious screening, just need and documentation. Lila helped draft the language. "I want it to feel neutral," she said. "Not charitable, just stabilizing." That word stayed. Stabilizing. The first application came 2 weeks later. A 22-year-old woman, 6 months pregnant, recently removed from her family home after refusing to place her baby for adoption. Her documents were complete. Lease offer pending. $14,600 needed for deposit, first month's rent, and basic supplies. We reviewed it like we review everything. Income verification, medical confirmation, budget breakdown, approved. Eli delivered the check in person. He came home quiet afterward. "She said thank you," he told me. "What did you say?" I asked. "I told her to build something steady." That was enough. Public attention faded, as it always does. Another headline replaced ours, another debate, another outrage. Lila returned to campus full-time. Her professors treated her normally again, mostly. One of them invited her to speak about medical autonomy. She declined. "I don't want to become a symbol," she told us. "I want to become competent." That felt right. My parents did not contact us again. No letters, no formal apology, no legal maneuvering. I heard through professional circles that my father's health was declining slowly. Parkinson's progresses in its own rhythm. I didn't investigate further, not from avoidance, from boundary. There's a difference. One evening in early spring, I logged into Walter's online memorial page. I hadn't planned to. It just felt unfinished. The page was simple: a photograph, dates, a short obituary outlining his early career, his move overseas, his business success, dozens of comments from colleagues and associates, professional respect, complicated admiration. I scrolled to the bottom and clicked "Leave a message." I didn't rewrite history. I didn't offer forgiveness. I wrote, "You hurt my husband when he was a child. That doesn't disappear. But you did not demand his daughter sacrifice herself for you. That matters. The funds will be used carefully. That matters too. Then I signed my name. No titles, just my name. I submitted it, closed the page, didn't mention it to Eli. 3 months later, he brought it up. I saw what you wrote, he said one night in the garage. I paused. You went looking? I asked. Yeah. He leaned against the workbench. It was fair, he said. That was the goal, I replied. He nodded. Fair is harder than angry, he added. Yes, I said. It is. The final legal documents arrived by courier in early February. Tax confirmations, trust closure statements, formal acknowledgement of distribution. I reviewed them all carefully, signed where required, filed them in a locked cabinet. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt organized, which, for me, is peace. A week later, my father emailed. No subject line, just a short message. I read about the foundation. It appears structured. That was his word again. Structured. I replied once. It is. Nothing else. He didn't respond. And that was enough. One evening, not long after, Lila was home for a long weekend. She stood in the kitchen rinsing dishes while Eli finished a small repair on a cabinet hinge. The house smelled like soap and roasted vegetables. She looked at me and asked, "Do you ever regret choosing Dad over them?" I thought carefully before answering. "I regret being forced to choose," I said. "Not the choice itself." She nodded slowly. "That makes sense." Eli looked up from the cabinet and smiled faintly. "You two are my whole family," he said. And that was true. Not emotionally exaggerated, just accurate. We built something that didn't require approval to function. That's the resolution most people don't expect. No shouting, no courtroom reversal, no public vindication, just systems aligned with values, money placed where it stabilizes rather than disrupts, silence where noise once lived, and a house wired safely from the inside out. There was one last thing left to do. Not dramatic, not symbolic, just administrative. I closed the documentation folder on my laptop, renamed it Archive. Then I shut the computer and let the room go quiet, because the story had moved from crisis to structure. And structure, once built properly, doesn't require constant defense. It holds. A few weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I found myself reorganizing the kitchen drawer where we keep batteries, spare keys, and instruction manuals no one ever reads. It wasn't urgent. It didn't need to be done. But I like things in order. The house was calm. Eli was outside adjusting a porch light for a neighbor. Lila was at the table with her laptop open, reviewing anatomy notes, a mug of tea cooling beside her. The window was cracked slightly. Spring air. Soft traffic in the distance. Nothing dramatic. I moved old receipts into a folder, replaced expired warranties, lined up the extra house keys neatly on a small hook inside the drawer. Ownership isn't loud. It looks like that. A house that feels settled. A family that moves normally through it. No tension sitting under the surface. The foundation quietly processed its 12th application that month. No media coverage. No social posts, just structured review. Eli built a simple intake checklist: proof of housing need, income documentation, short explanation, no essays about morality, no requirement to explain family history in detail. We approved 4 grants that cycle. I signed the disbursement letters one at a time, not as a savior, as a system, stabilizing, like Lila had said. My parents haven't contacted us again. Occasionally, I hear updates through mutual professional circles. My father's tremor is more pronounced now. My mother reduced her clinic hours. I don't feel anger when I hear it. I feel distance. And distance, when chosen intentionally, can be healthy. I don't check their social media. I don't ask for updates. I don't rehearse old arguments in my head. Closure isn't a conversation. It's a boundary you maintain. Lila started her internship with the ethics committee this semester. Her first week, she came home and sat at the kitchen table the same way she did the day we opened that envelope. "I reviewed a donor case today," she said. "Complicated?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. Financial pressure, extended family involvement, a lot of noise. She looked at me carefully. I asked one question, she said. Does the patient feel free? And? Eli asked. They did, she answered. Once the room quieted. She smiled slightly. That was it. No speeches, no hero narrative. Just a young woman learning how to sit in difficult rooms without surrendering clarity. Sometimes people ask me, quietly, how we managed it. The estrangement, the money, the public scrutiny, the decision. I tell them the same thing every time. We didn't react. We organized. We separated feeling from structure. We made decisions based on documentation, not panic. And we accepted that some relationships don't get repaired. They get archived. Last week, one of Eli's apprentices asked him for advice. He'd gotten into an argument with his parents about his career choice. They wanted him in law school. He wanted to stay in the trades. Eli told him, "Build something steady, the rest gets quieter." That's the closest we get to philosophy in this house. Tonight, after dinner, I wiped down the kitchen counters slowly. The scent of lemon cleaner lingered. Eli checked the locks. Lila packed her bag for campus. Routine. Predictable. Peaceful. 19 years ago, I stood in the rain with 2 trash bags and a closed front door behind me. Today, I stand in a kitchen we own, in a life we built deliberately, without asking anyone to validate it. That's enough. If you've listened this far, thank you for being here with me. If this story felt grounding or familiar in any way, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think. I'm always curious, what city are you watching from, and what time is it where you are right now? Leave it in the comments. I read them. And if you're in the mood to keep listening, 2 stories are about to appear on your screen, both about quiet boundaries and the unexpected ways life turns steady. Take care of yourself.